Well, we are 2 o'clock straight up, so let's admit everybody
Awesome.
and give them a chance to join here. Oh, Liana Morris, I love your
I
avatar.
love her. Yes.
I will change it. I was telling Reena the other night, like my son did this like years ago, and no matter what I do, it always defaults to this. I cannot get it to not default to being a panda, but it's also adorable. So
You
give it
know
a second to get.
what it reminds me of? I don't know if you guys ever saw this, but there was a viral video back during COVID where this
I'm not a
lawyer
cat.
was a cat. Yeah. That was absolutely hilarious. And just even thinking about it now, I remember I watched that thing. I must have watched it a dozen times. I was cracking up every time. And so we're gonna put you in the I am not a panda category.
It's flawed. I said it. David Morris also, or lost David Morris panda or something like that. It was all silly. Got better. She just said, I'm gonna be gonna study a doctor, pretend to change myself.
All right. Well, with that amusement out of the way, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'll have to make sure that I keep an eye on the waiting room in case somebody told me last time we did one of these training sessions that, man, I was in the waiting room and just never got in. I'm like, oh, sorry about that. But listen, I will let you guys know we are recording this, and because you're registered, we'll make a very easy access to the recording. So if you want to go back and review, my name, for those who don't know, my name is Bob Sager. I'm the founder of SpearPoint Solutions, and we utilize teaching creative thinking methods to help business outthink the competition, for lack of a better word. And we've got done with you programs where we do the training, and we've got done for you programs where we do the thinking for you and come up with the strategies to help grow your business. I'm joined by Reena Friedman Watts today, and Reena is just quite a fascinating individual to me. She and I have known each other for quite a few years, but Reena is a podcast. I call her a podcast expert or a podcast guru. She really knows what she's doing, and I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more formally later. But to to kick us off, I'm going to go first. I've got some training on the science of creative thinking and kind of what that can mean to you. And let me go ahead and share my screen here. And get to the right button. And all right. And let's make this, let's see if we can go full screen here, guys. All right. Everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
All right. So Uh, the name of this presentation, as you can see there, is Outrunning the Bear and the strategies to outpace the competition and thrive in business. There's an old joke about two hikers in the woods who notice a bear charging toward them, and the first hiker hastily is removing his trail boots and putting on his running shoes. And the second hiker nervously laughs and says, "Dude, why are you bothering changing shoes? You can't outrun a bear." And the first hiker says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." And that's, I think, a perfect intro to what we're talking about here is that, that old joke, it highlights a critical business truth that survival is not about outrunning the bear. It's about outrunning the competition. The bear represents any threat to business health, and that could be external or internal, right? And often those threats, they appear like a developing hurricane. I mean, you think back in history, probably one of the worst hurricane disasters in the history of the U.S. was Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. And I often have wondered about that. It's like, those people had like over a week's worth of notice. The entire city of New Orleans, the entire Gulf Coast, they had all this warning, and yet it turned into a tragedy. And so for business, it's often the same way, but a lot of times business leaders will ignore the signs until it's too late. And so think about this. The list of brands that were market leaders at one time, dominant in their marketplace at one time, are now just kind of a footnote in history in a lot of cases. They they went out of business for a lot of different reasons. Technology, management became complacent. I don't know if you guys ever heard this story before, but Kodak, an engineer in Kodak actually invented digital photography, and the executives at Kodak were afraid that was just going to cannibalize their film business, and they said under no circumstances is anybody allowed to know about this. But that's pretty short-sighted, right? And frankly, it cost them their company. Um, Blockbuster Video, that's another good example. Pan Am is another good example. I talked before about, sometimes the threats are external, but sometimes they're internal too. I call this, you got to sometimes outrun yourself. Back in the early 60s, in the early days of franchising of McDonald's, there was a franchise actually, I'm in Southwest Ohio, just a little north of the city of Cincinnati, and this restaurant was in Cincinnati. Well, the population of Ohio, in particular Southwest Ohio, there were lots and lots and lots of Catholics. And back in the 60s, there was Catholics were not allowed to eat meat on Friday. And so with McDonald's serving hamburgers, cheeseburgers, and French fries, guess who didn't get the lunch and dinner business on Fridays? And so Lou Groen, the franchisee in Cincinnati, said, "I've got to do something about this, or I'm going to be out of business." And so he, without asking permission, came up with a concept for the filet of fish sandwich. And when Ray Kroc, the head of McDonald's, found out about it, he was livid. And he said he basically was going to take Groen's franchise away because he said you violated your franchise agreement. And Groen said, "Well, look," he said, "that's not going to matter a whole lot because if I don't start selling, making sales on Fridays, I'm going to be out of business anyway." So Kroc was, he was pretty hard-headed, but he was also open-minded enough to go, okay, I get your point, and maybe if that's an issue for you, it will be an issue for others. So he Kroc proposed a sandwich that they could serve, a meatless sandwich that they could serve on Fridays called a hula burger. And the hula burger was a grilled piece of pineapple, grilled slice of pineapple on a bun with a slice of cheese. And he said, I like this idea better. Croc did. He said, I like this idea better than your filet of fish sandwich. But I'll tell you what, we will do a test market. And I forget whether it was 60 days or 90 days, and whichever one outsells the other, not only will you be able to sell it, but we'll put that on our menu nationwide. And so guess which one outsold the other? I bet until this, unless you knew that story before, you'd never heard of the hula burger. The filet of fish outsold the hula burger 9-1. So that's how the filet of fish became a regular menu item with McDonald's and has been ever since. So, but the point is, in telling that story is sometimes you have to disrupt yourself, right? And you've got to challenge all assumptions, even if they're not necessarily a problem at the moment. Your key to thriving in the modern economy is this: continuous innovation. And what's the key to continuous innovation? It's key, but it's not KEY, it's KEI. Well, those are the three elements that factor into generating profit enhancing ideas. The K stands for knowledge. Your knowledge is whatever it is. Now, that's something I think you ought to be continuously improving. That's where you ought to read and study other aspects of business, other businesses altogether. In whatever way you can grow your knowledge, you should. The E stands for experience. Your experience is whatever your experience is. Now, one thing I will tell you that in doing corporate training, what have observed is everybody has a unique life experience, and that's why applying the third factor um, results in coming up with ideas. The I stands for imagination. So that combination, that knowledge, experience, and imagination, is what we found. You can use the exact same methods that we teach in our corporate training and that we use in our business strategy development. One person can use that exact same strategy, looking at the exact same circumstance or problem, and come up with a completely different idea. And that's really that's the power in the methods that we use, I would say. Um, what we're going to talk about today is transforming revenue streams. You know, sometimes, I was reading a post on LinkedIn earlier today, and this guy was talking about what worked in 2021 versus what works in now 2026. In just 5 years, the market can shift so rapidly. So you've got to always be on the lookout. If you're smart in business, you've got to always be on the lookout for new revenue streams, alternative revenue streams to what you've got currently. So uh, a simple creative method is to list your products that you are offering currently. Assumes that you're a product vendor, and and list that product and then follow it with as a service. In other words, look at everything that you offer as a product and ask yourself, in what ways could we market that as a service as opposed to just a product? A couple of examples of that frankly have transformed Microsoft in a big way, and that's their Microsoft Office 365. Prior to probably 10 years ago, I guess it was when they launched Office 365, the Office suite just came on software. And they would offer a new version of it every year or two, and people would buy that software, install it, and that was it. That was a one-time sale. But with Office 365, it's a subscription. It's Office 365 as a service, or Office Suite as a service, and it's a recurring source of revenue. The advantage to the consumer is obvious. They always get the most up-to-date software without having to do anything, and for a reasonable subscription price. And it became a tremendous source of revenue for Microsoft. Another good example of transportation as a service, Uber and Lyft, those ride-sharing services. So here's here's some questions that you can ask yourself that will help you think about, how you can go about doing this. Ask yourself, in what ways could turning this product into a service add so much value that it completely disrupts the market? Um, how can this provide value to customers that they aren't currently receiving from our competitors or us? And what specific value add could be applied to enhance the attractiveness of becoming a long-term subscriber? In other words, if they're a subscriber, let me back up a step. In my book, 101 Freaking Brilliant Business Ideas and 10 Ways You Can Create Your Own, there's a concept in there for pizza as a service. And so if you haven't read that book, one, there's a digital version of it now available that's we attracted sponsors for that, so it's available at no charge. If you want a copy of that, just PM me on LinkedIn or leave it in the chat here. Let me know. I'm happy to provide you with that. And so you can read all about the concept of pizza as a service, and in that concept, in that strategy, there are ideas on how that would work as pizza as a service would work to add so much value that it absolutely disrupts the industry. And so if you want that, that'll give you some fodder for activating your imagination. Think about this. The pace of adoption of new offerings in the marketplace, I mean, it boggles the mind when you stop to think about this. It took Netflix 3.5 years to reach 1 million subscribers. It took Facebook less than a year, 10 months. Spotify got to seven figures in half that time, 5 months, which all three of those really seem pretty astounding until you stop to think about that when ChatGPT launched, it took them 5 days to get to 1 million users. I mean, it's just stunning. We live in such an interconnected world that it's so much easier, even for companies that are of no size, micro-sized companies. It's so much easier in today's world to really attract a huge audience in a short amount of time. So the question is, do you want to be the disrupted or do you want to be the disruptor? Now, let me tell you, desperation, like the guy that was had the McDonald's franchise in Cincinnati, that can certainly be, the impetus for having to innovate something new. But the smartest companies that are going to thrive best in the modern economy are those companies that are continuously innovating, right? Using this method or others to always uh, be disrupting others, but be disrupting themselves as well. When my kids were growing up, they would ask me, "Hey, Dad, do I need a jacket? Do I need an umbrella?" And I'm like, "Look, take one with you because it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it." So I hope this helps you. I want you to always keep your running shoes on, right? Because the bear's always in pursuit. Uh, so those three things, awareness, a commitment to continuous innovation, and the use of scientific creative thinking methods like the ones that we teach, those are your running shoes. And you can outrun the competition without breaking a sweat if you have those three things. If you need help, here's how to reach me. Our company and all the information that about us is available on spearpointonline.com. And of course, you can reach me either on LinkedIn or at bob@spearpointonline.com. So I hope you guys let me stop sharing my screen here. Uh, I hope you guys got something out of that. And Reena, what are your thoughts about outrunning the bear?
I'm glad you asked. That was a great presentation because I was going to compare Outrunning the Bear to a lot of people quit podcasting. So everybody gets excited and they have an idea and they're like, I want to start a show. But then there's a lot of work that goes into it. It's not just hitting record. And
Yeah.
there's this fad of, recording and then having to put a zillion clips across all social media platforms. And I think that's where people get exhausted. Like when I first started podcasting 5, 6 years ago, even before that, I guested on other people's podcasts. I was a part of other people's events and webinars. And I felt like that was a good way. And I even suggest that to other people to kind of tiptoe your way into it and see if you actually want to do it. Is guest on other people's podcasts, be on people's panels, listen to podcasts, do your research, and even before reaching out to podcasts, know what their show is about before you just pitch slap people. That's what it's called, or cold reach out to people or spam people. So there's like levels to it, right? You could guest, you could be a part of people's events like we're doing right now. But I think really where people burn out or pod fade is that, they want to launch it, they want to be Oprah, they want to have a YouTube channel, right? Like you can start off audio. You can start by just sharing it on LinkedIn or where your people are. Do you have a Facebook group? Do you have a newsletter? Right? Like, don't try to be everywhere at once because that will get you to start quick and end quick.
Yeah.
And you will get chased down by everyone who's been doing it longer and you will quit.
Hey, listen, if you don't mind, I have actually I put together a few questions
Yeah.
that I want to ask you because I think, since we're talking about the subject of podcasting, I think people, they got to get used to, asking and answering questions. So I thought maybe for your segment of this training, I thought that might be a good way to go. And
Yeah,
so if
let's
you don't
let's do it.
mind, all right, so. Let me get my list of questions here. And um, so the first one that I have is, should you be scripted or not when starting a podcast? I mean, should you just go off willy-nilly? Should you have a plan? What is your approach to that?
Yes, that is a great question. And I do feel like I have worked on shows that just want to be scripted. I think that even if you want to be scripted and have kind of an outline, you have to not be married to the script because if you're just waiting to get to the next question, you're not even listening to the answer that they're giving you, or not even able to really hear what the responses that they're giving you, the listener is going to tune out. And for me personally, when I have a script or when I have a slide deck, I feel like I have to read everything on it. And it honestly makes me nervous, and you sound like you're reading. So, unless you're like an expert presenter like you just did, like you're very comfortable just giving a presentation, I think that having a script is going to make you sound like a bot.
You know,
So, you can use it as an outline, just don't read from the script.
that reminds me, Rena, of really kind of a basic principle of interacting with, engaging with people, and that is genuine curiosity and interest in others. If you're going to effectively work with people, if you're going to effectively relate to them, you've got to have that. And if you're just listening long enough to get to your next question, it kind of demonstrates the opposite.
It really does. Yeah, I actually even wanted to kind of go back to your presentation a little bit about I had never even heard of the hula burger. I thought that that was a great example. And I, before I started keeping kosher, so I'm now giving you something personal about myself. I loved the fish sandwich, and I had no idea the history of that. So that's
Yeah,
fascinating. And that too, I feel like is really important to podcasting is the more specific you can be about a story or an experience or a shared experience. Even in preparing for this, I was thinking of like, what videos have you sent me? I knew that you had sent me a video about a Kenneth Cole and how Kenneth Cole became a brand. So I was like, hey, that would show that I'm prepared for this conversation by bringing up something that you had shared with me and an example that you had shared with me, that something was a shared experience between us and something that was personal, but yet applied to your brand. So that's something that I think it's okay, like as far as being scripted, are like talking points. You can have
right.
talking points and you can write down things that you guys have shared between each other. Like, you introduced me to Jamie Cohen. That was a fruitful conversation. She and I ended up collaborating, creating content, doing business together. So if I were to make an introduction between you and someone, I would say not only does he send me like genius ideas and things around branding and creating content, but he makes me excellent introductions. Here's one that he made. I got together with this girl, and on our very first time of getting together, we spent 3 hours together. I mean, he is an expert connector.
Yeah, that's something that when this is kind of off the topic of podcasting, but it kind of is related because if you're going to get good guests on your podcast, networking is an essential, right? And so part of people think of networking as some people, not everybody. Some people think of networking as going to an event, and handing out your business cards. Spending 30 seconds listening to somebody else long enough, kind of going back to our previous point, listening to somebody long enough, so you can pitch slap them in person or online. And but really, a part of being a good networker is is outside of events. It's recognizing when two people ought to know one another, right? That either you just have an intuitive feeling it's a good fit, or you you there's something that they can collaborate on business wise. So let me um, let me ask you about. I think this might be kind of a sensitive topic for some people. What do you think about AI as it relates to podcasting? Since AI is kind of all the rage these days.
When I first started podcasting, AI, to be honest, wasn't even there. And so you can tell the difference between people who started a creative project without AI and the ones that are now just using AI to construct the entire thing. Here's where I think AI is useful. Like, if you want to say something, but you don't know how to say it the best way possible, you can type all of your ideas into it and be like, hey, help me join these thoughts or help me say this in a fluid way. That's where I think AI is amazing. Like, you know, sorry, in my podcast, like I interview people and I share the stories with my dad, and then he reacts at the end of every episode, and then from his reaction I formulate the intro. And so sometimes my dad says a bunch of ideas and I want to be able to include some of that in the intro. So what I'll do in AI is I will take a bunch of my dad's thoughts and I'll be like, how do I apply that in a Better Call Daddy voice, but also make it a podcast intro with a hook? So that's where I think AI is helpful, is like you can use it to help organize your thoughts. You can use it to help structure a podcast. Like, hey, ChatGPT, what would be, 5 to 10 mini episodes that I could do around a daddy daughter relationship? And it can give you ideas or topics or ideas. But I don't think you should say, like, hey, I'm interviewing Bob Sager. What are 5 things I should ask him? Because that's not personal. That's not engaging. That's not really anything between us. Like, I'd be better off scrolling back through our conversations of like when we connected, are you a dad? Have you ever made any dad jokes? Like, what are the last 5, newsletters you've done, and something that I can relate to the work that you've done.
Right, right. What it reminds me of a little bit. We were prior to doing this when we were talking last week. It reminds me of there's a great. I was introduced to this early in my career. There's a great acronym formula that you can use. Now, I'm going to share this with the viewers here, but let me preface it by saying this will not work if you do not have a genuine interest in other people, right? If you're just going through these as like check boxes, you're gonna sound like a bot, right? You're gonna sound like you don't really care. But having said all that, having prefaced it by you've got to have genuine interest in other people for these questions to work. There's a there's a an acronym called FORM, FORM. And those stand for these are 4 topics that they're non-threatening, and almost everybody is anxious and willing to talk about these. And when you give people a chance to talk about themselves, that's typically everybody's favorite subject, right? They love it, right? And that endears you to them. So the FORM stands for family, occupation, recreation, and moves. And so when you can, and by the way, I've got some sample questions within that FORM framework that if people want, I've got a handout that people can have. But I I think if you're going to start a podcast, right, that's something, those 4 topics would be something that you can start conversations around and then use your genuine curiosity and your knowledge and experience, like we referenced in my presentation, to carry the conversation from there. What, all right, so
Can you
let's
give me an
say,
example of each one of those? I mean, family. Yeah,
sure,
share something
yeah.
about where
So,
you came
yeah,
from.
you know, and listen, and I think part of breaking the ice is sharing a little bit of information about yourself. Like,
Yeah.
hey, yeah, I'm the daddy of four now grown children. Do you have any children yourself? That would be a family type of question. Occupation, I see that you do blah, blah, blah. Has that been a career for you, or is that just a job? Or, and under the moves category, this is one of my favorite. Moves is one of my favorite because let's say Reena, you live in and around the Houston, Texas area. Are you from there originally, or are you transplanted from somewhere else? Right? It's just sort of natural topics of conversation. Recreation is another good one too. Back during my 17-year career in the financial services industry, one of the ways that I picked up a lot of clients is I would go to golf stores and I would go to golf courses. And so it's a commonality that you have. But one of the questions that I like to ask if I wasn't in that situation is, what do you do for fun when you're not talking to me or besides
I
talking
love
to me,
that.
right?
That's great. I was going to say, how's your golf game?
Well, but you don't know if you're not in that environment whether they're a golfer or not, right? So if they are a golfer, if they're at a golf shop, would you describe golf as fun or is it more of a four-letter word? Right. So,
That's great.
yeah. So, all right. So you've got your guest, you've got your show. What are some of the smart ways about going about promoting it?
Yes. I'll tell you, I just went to a podcasting event this year, podcast movement. I had a total blast. And the first night was an after party sponsored by iHeart, and it was at the Chicken and Pickle, which is a pickleball place. And this is like a whole new trend, this pickleball thing. But even before I got to the pickleball courts, they had like three or four drinks that you could choose from. And so I asked the girl who was handing out the drinks, I was like, what are most people grabbing? What's the best one? And I made friends with her. And then I was like, she just seems so friendly. And, it was a podcasting event. And I just was like, hey, can I get you to say, the name of the drink and like Better Call Daddy or something like that? And she was like, yeah. And not only that, I'll get 20 more people to do it. Let's go around here together. I was
Sweet.
like, oh my God, that's so amazing. And so I just started getting people to say the name of my podcast in a funny way. Are they a daddy's girl? Are they a dad? Do you have a daddy line? Something like that. And just the name of my show. And it was so much easier to get people to participate in that way, And then I said, hey, I'm going to share it either on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. Like, what platform would be best to tag you? And so then I was like connecting with all of these new people on the channels that they would prefer to engage me on. And it was kind of even giving me insight into like where I need to be. Like where are all these podcasters? Are they on Instagram? Are they on TikTok? Are they on YouTube? Like where do they want to connect with me? So that was really interesting. And then just like pick a hashtag. So like it could be the name of your show. It could be hashtag chicken and pickle. It could be hashtag podcast movement. So I think that that is a really good idea for podcasters. It's like behind the scenes. Like, don't just post a podcast clip of you and your guest. Like, yes, you need to show that because everyone's doing that. And that's kind of like become like an industry standard thing to do. But in between that, take a picture of a quote that you're sharing during a presentation with the person or a pre-chat or a funny mishap that happens during the recording like you forgot to hit record, let's try again, or
Nobody does
I
that.
hit record like 5 minutes in, I needed to re-record something. Like the mishaps are hilarious, people love that. Or getting somebody just to share what's the best place for them to listen, just be a real person.
Well, do you think, and this is just sort of a thought about humanity, and maybe this sort of goes back to was something I think a lot of people suffer, and I know you and I have talked about this, this imposter syndrome that it's like, if I'm going to be out there in public, I, I've got to be perfect, right? I don't want people to think I'm a screw up, right? And so what are your thoughts about, by the way, I think sharing that kind of stuff, like I mentioned to you, the last one of these training sessions I did with me and my joint trainer, Chad Johnson, who was talking about the new LinkedIn algorithm. I was so excited in our pre-show conversation, I forgot to hit record. And I didn't even realize it until after when I said, "Oh, now I need to get the record." Oh, wait a minute. I forgot to hit the damn record button. And it's like, "Oh no, what is wrong with
But
me?"
that in itself could be a content moment. Like there's this guy, Mark Ronick, and he's the host of podcast Morning Chat. And he had an interview with somebody who he looked up to in the industry, Heather Parody. And he made a post about it. He was like, I recorded or didn't record an entire episode before he finished realizing with somebody who he looked up to and somebody that was hard to book.
Hmm.
And he was so embarrassed and he made a public apology to the person. And then that person who also is a podcaster was like, hey, Heather Parody, she's very cool. She's also been a guest on my show. She was like, we can record another time. And there you go. But it led to the perfect opportunity to make content about it. Like even professionals who've been in the industry for 20 years, or even you that's a master at, doing these kind of presentations and you don't get the imposter syndrome anymore, sometimes make mistakes. And here's another example, Vanessa Van Edwards, who I think has been like on Oprah and she's, has a sizable following on Instagram. I love her content. She's a best-selling author. She put a clip of herself on Instagram, and there's a feature on Instagram where you can upload to 4K, through the Edits app. So you can take like a Zoom recording and you can increase the quality of the picture by uploading it through the Edits app and make it 4K. And so many of her audience commented, "Are you AI? Is this even you? You look weird." So we are in a generation now where kids are questioning whether you're AI, your audience is questioning whether you're AI. People want to see the wrinkles, people want the filters off. I think people want the mishaps, people want the creativity. And that's, I think, the more comfortable you can get with being on the fly and showing your mistakes and being human, you're going to break through the noise. Don't be perfect.
Okay, so what advice would you have? Because I think a lot of people, especially if they're going to be doing a video pod portion of their podcast, right? And now Spotify, you have both audio and video, right?
Hmm.
And so I think so many people, they're so intimidated by being on video. And, I think it goes back to that imposter syndrome. So what are your what are your thoughts or advice for people who have imposter syndrome, even if they don't tell others that they do?
Are you
What are
talking about
they?
yourself? No.
Oh no, I don't. I don't give a shit what people think.
Okay,
Sorry.
so yeah, no, some
So
advice
what are your thoughts or
that I
advice?
tell early on podcasters is kind of like what I said in the beginning. Guest on other people's show, but listen to other podcasts too, because podcasters that have done 200 episodes, 300 episodes, 400 episodes, if you listen to them, you'll get a sense of flow of like how these shows go, and then you can be more prepared for being in an interview. The more that you listen to other podcasters, it will kind of give you an idea of what that feels like, what that sounds like. So I would say listen to other podcasters that you admire. And then the whole reason I have a podcast with my dad is because he puts me at ease. Interview people who like you, interview people who champion you, interview people that you've worked with that it's gone well with them. Like that's what I do. Like if you've had a positive experience working with someone and they are going to sing your praises, they're the perfect guest. if you've had awkward experiences with someone or someone's reached out to you and they know nothing about you, either like have a pre-chat with them to see if you guys have a good interaction or like interview at least 50 people first.
Well, there you go. All right, let me see if there's anything else on my list of questions here that we have missed before we open it up for some Q&A with the audience here.
I want to shout out Leanna. I'm getting ready to interview her, and it's funny, but
Oh,
she is one of my big listeners. And when she shared that with me at the end of Spotify Wrapped, and was like, "I have spent like 18 hours with you listening to your podcast." I'm like, "You'd be the perfect guest." You know what I mean? Because
there you go.
yes. And then we had a
Um,
pre-chat recently, and she brought up a story. She's laughing. She brought up a story of when we went on this trip together in college and how we had just gone to like the Dead Sea and we were covered in mud. It was like literally coming out of our ears. And we walk into this like posh hotel, and we probably should have rinsed off more. And people were like, getting ready for dinner and like looking their best. And we were oozing mud. And
fit right in, huh?
I was like, oh my God, like what an amazing shared experience. We have to retell that. That is so funny.
All right, so one more question, and then we'll open it up for any Q&A before we wrap up here. What do you see briefly as the future of podcasting?
Yes, great question. I think the future of podcasting is it's going to take over legacy media. We're already seeing people saying that. It's funny because I interviewed Jerry Springer in 2002, who had started my career, and I even asked him about network television. He was like, people can create a following, and it can be honestly wherever your people are. It can be on TikTok, it can be on YouTube, it can be on LinkedIn. You can create a following and you can create your own show, and people are believing and trusting that now more than the news. I think that it's a skill that's valuable for your children. I think you should teach them how to edit, how to market themselves, how to have fun creating content in a safe way. But I think the future of podcasting is going to be everyone's doing it. It's going to be like a resume. Even resumes can be totally written now by Chat GPT. So podcasting is like a differentiator. You said, how could we feel comfortable on video? You better get comfortable doing it because it is the future for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. I could not agree more. And so I think, and do you think there's a bit of business advice that I have given multiple people over the years, and that is narrow your focus and you'll broaden your reach. And do you think that the sort of the era of specialization in terms of podcasting is it's going to be even more specialized in the future? Like it's not just going to be, like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get when you tune into this show. That'd be the Forrest Gump podcast. Uh,
I know people that have different specializations and have created big audiences. For example, one of my favorite shows is called The Stupid History Minute, and he's a history guy and he does 1 minute segments on the history of stupid items around the house or, the history of the hockey stick, the history of the Stanley water bottle, the history of Invisalign. And even right now on that show, he is giving his audience the chance, people that listen to the show. I've now been on a show like 4 times. I love the show. I think it's genius. He gives people in the audience the opportunity to pitch an item that they use in their house that hasn't been covered. And he's done like 1,000 shows. So I did the history of Invisalign. That's why I brought that one up. I did the history of the Hanukkah song with Adam Sandler. I did the history of Hanukkah, but that was unique to me.
right.
Says one of my kids was getting ready to start with Invisalign. I was like, how long have those been around? What's the roots there? I'd like to know.
Yeah.
And then the history of the Hanukkah song, because it was around the holiday, that was a holiday he wasn't covering. So he thought it'd be fun for me to do it. So yes, I think he has a huge audience by doing that, and he lets his audience be involved by presenting new ideas. Another way that I've gotten my audience involved is I've had podcasters say, like, "Hi, I'm Kev from the Stupid History Minute, and you're listening to Better Call Daddy." And I did that for like a month where I just had other podcasters introduce themselves, the name of their show, and then my show. That makes it fun instead of an
Yeah.
ad. No one wants to listen to an ad, but people want to know who your listeners are.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's cool. Well, listen, this has been a really good conversation. I hope people got a lot out of this, and I hope people got a lot out of the Outrunning the Bear presentation that I did earlier. Let's open it up to see if anybody has any quick questions that we can answer. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask me or Rena any question that you were just dying to know the answer to, but were afraid to ask. Now's your chance to ask. I agree. By the way, Leanna wrote a comment here in the chat earlier where we were talking about genuine interest in other people. She said intention and connection is everything. I could not agree with you more, Leanna. So, like I said, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have. Oh, Rena, what questions do you have for me that maybe can kick off what we're talking about here?
I was going to say, in response to your presentation, because you and I have been connected for years on LinkedIn, and you were talking about shifts that happen. I mean, can you talk to me a little bit about the shifts that you've seen even on LinkedIn and how
Oh,
people engage there and what used to be accepted and what's accepted now?
well, it's massive and it's always changing. I mean, from the time that I got on LinkedIn, I think I got a LinkedIn account. I think it was 2008. It was either 2008 or 2009. And so, just, you know, my gosh, that's like massive changes. In fact, I have a totally different career now than I had then. Back in when I first got on LinkedIn, that was at the very end of my financial services career. I spent 17 years in that industry. And now, I teach people creative thinking and just sort of general success principles that go along with that. Oh, and this is a secret. Don't tell
Ooh.
anybody this. But in order to come up with better business ideas, one of the things that you have to understand is you've got to understand how people work. And so going back to my career in financial services, I've been studying. I did not even realize that this had an official name, Rena, but I've been studying behavioral science for many years. I just called it the psychology, sociology, and biology of human action. I did not know that it had a shorter name. And so built when we do training, for corporations, that's built into the teaching of the scientific creative thinking methods as well. It's just what it kind of sounds boring. Honestly, it was like, oh, science, psychology, that sounds boring. But you've got to really, if you understand that and you understand what motivates people to act and what motivates them to not act, right? What causes them to hesitate, then the ideas that you can come up with are better
Mm.
because they work with people as opposed to constantly swimming upstream.
That definitely applies to sales. That makes me think of, I just bought a new car, and, the difference between dealerships was night and day. Going back to what you were saying, even about desperation. If you don't show desperation and you're very cool and you're offering coffees and water and take your time and do you have any more questions and you're making all parties feel very comfortable, and then the car dealership looks clean and professional and take as many rides as you want, and if somebody comes in there to buy and they have that kind of experience, they're willing to sign on the dotted line.
Yeah. What that reminds me of is there's This is almost counterintuitive, but when you don't need something, you're much more likely to get it. It's
Mm.
sort of like back in the days when I was asking girls for dates. This has been a little while ago. But if I didn't really care whether somebody, now I wanted them to say yes, but I wasn't going to be devastated, right? The same thing in sales and the same thing in any walk of life. When you need something, when you need it, you almost will never get it
Ooh, that is
because
so true.
that desperation energy, if anybody listening in has had sales training before, they have heard that there are three things that communicate your message to people. That's body language, tone of voice, and the actual, words that you say. Well, I'm here, that does communicate to people, but there's something that overrides all of those, and that is the energy that people read from you. People can't even they can't even put words to it, but somebody can look right, smell right, sound right, right? And yet somebody will think to themselves, they often won't say this, but they'll think to themselves, I do not trust this person.
Oh God, yeah.
And I don't know why. I can't really put my finger on it, right? Well, I just don't trust them.
Yep.
And I remember one of the first creative thinking training sessions I ever did. It was at a regional conference for an insurance company. And I was telling those guys, I said, listen, we're going to work on coming up with some ideas on prospecting. Utilizing these methods, we're going to come up with some ideas on prospecting. And one of the reasons that you want to get really good at prospecting is because if you had 30 people who might buy from you versus three, if you had 30, some of them are going to buy as long as you've got a decent product or service offering. Some of them are going to buy from you. If you had three, all of a sudden, it really, really matters whether they buy or not. But if you have 30 or 60, it doesn't matter as much. You can be so much more relaxed because you know some of them are going to buy. And then the pressure is off. You know, I said, if you need to make a sale, you almost never will.
It's so, so true. I want to kind of loop that into this event thing that I'm putting on Saturday night. I was reached out to by another podcaster because podcasters need each other. It's a lonely world. If you're just a solopreneur, and her name is Remy Roy, and she is the founder of Podground. And her and I are hosting a trivia night this Saturday night. And we have 46 people signed up, so maybe 20 will be there. And there's room for more. And it's just about the history of podcasting. It's going to be fun. We have three prizes to give away for participants. And one of the winners will just honestly be the hype person. The person is like hyping up the crowd and engaging in the chat. So that's an easy thank you, Gabriella, for stopping by. She's one of the ones that had reached out to me about learning about podcasting. So I'm glad that she showed up. That's very cool that she came. Noted. So yeah, Saturday night is a podcasting trivia night, and it's just meant to be fun. We're not selling anything. It's just a community builder for people that either want to be on a podcast, are podcasters, have guested on podcasts, and yeah, you might want to look up the history of podcasting before showing up so you can maybe win a prize.
How do so if somebody wanted to join, do you have to register? Do you,
Yes, there is an Eventbrite, and I will attach that to my Instagram profile. I'm going to do a post about it today. I also did a post about it on my LinkedIn, and I will tag that on. I mean, I will. What is it? Pin that to my profile so it's easy to find. Or you can just reach out to me at Reena Friedman Watts on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I'm everywhere, Instagram, and I can send you a link to sign up.
you are everywhere, aren't you?
I am. But I started my very first platform that I really started to build out, and I think is how we originally connected, was LinkedIn, because my day
Yeah.
job was reaching out to people cold, um, on LinkedIn, and I had to get even strategic about not sounding like a bot even before bots were a thing. And I was connecting with financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys. I was working for a financial firm and trying to get them to those fancy steak dinners that people put on to try to sell you these high-end life insurance products. Isn't that
You know,
crazy?
something that, you know what, and I had totally forgotten about that because we've been connected for so long. I had forgotten about that, but I remember.
I used to pitch badly and I learned from that. And that's
I think
also something you teach is, from bad ideas come good ideas. And look, I didn't
yes.
know bad protocols. I was just following what I was told to do. I even have gone back through some of my LinkedIn reach outs and been like, oh, I'm sorry I reached out to you in such a bogus, like embarrassing way. But thanks for connecting with me anyway and giving me grace. Would you like to have a call and get to know each other?
Yeah. Well, turning lemons into lemonade, right?
And I think
So,
that actually that's a very human thing to do. Like if people have connected with you and you honestly don't know who your contacts are, there's a guy that I interviewed. His name is Reno Levinson. This guy is genius. He's got like 2,000 connections and he keeps it around there. And every New Year's, he'll go on like a spree of reaching out to all his connections and be like, hey, thank you for connecting with me. And I actually want to connect with people in my network. What are you up to? How are your holidays? Are you still podcasting? Are you still doing webinars? Are you still doing TEDx's? Have you written any new books? Just to actually know the people that you're connected to, like warm up your current inbox. Like who has recently reached out to you? There is gold in your inbox. Nurture it.
and really that goes back to a point that we were making earlier, which is genuine interest and curiosity about other people. It's that's so crucial, and you can't fake it.
No,
You
no,
cannot you cannot fake genuine interest, right? You're either interested or people can really tell.
it shows. And you
Absolutely.
know what? I even had that on the slides that I put together as backup for this presentation, but energy is contagious. If you're excited about something, people can tell that too. Like if you genuinely are like excited about something you're putting on, like this trivia night thing, it totally sounds like fun and I know the prizes are good and I like the co-host. People want to come because they can tell like you're going to be there and you're going to be excited. And they can also tell if you're not promoting something as much, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you know, Rena, I totally agree with you. Enthusiasm is contagious. This is what I started to ask about. Did you know that the root word for enthusiasm is entheos, which is Greek, and it means godlike.
Ooh, I love that.
That
Yeah.
might be a good note to wrap on.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, so I'm going to pin that event. I hope to see you there on Saturday. Bob, thank you so much for this interactive, fun presentation. Send it to me. Maybe I'll make some clips of it.
Yeah, I will definitely do that. And if people need help on training on creative thinking or need help developing business strategies that help you differentiate yourself from the competition so that you're not just competing on price, feel free to reach out to me and we can help you with that. So with that, we're going to put an amen on this session and thank everybody for tuning in live and thank you for watching a recording if you're watching a recording. All right. Thanks again, Reena.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. This was great.
Yay, you're awesome.
Great.
Thank you for coming, Leanna.